Now, immigration is a hot topic in this election year in the United States. But the fact that Cubans still don't need a visa for the US has been pretty much ignored. Even as relations between Cuba and the US slowly normalise, the numbers of Cubans arriving are still rising. For example, in the last 10 months, more than 46,000 Cubans have arrived. That's according to the US think tank, the Pew Research Center.
At the weekend, the Cuban government complained, saying that those leaving for the United States were victims of the politicization of the migration issue by the U.S. government, which Havana said stimulates illegal and unsafe immigration. So is it time for the U.S. to stop this open-door policy? Ramon Sanchez is the head of an anti-Castro exile group that's called Democracy Movement in Florida.
Well, the same situation has been for the last almost 60 years. People escape from Cuba and try to make it to the United States to reunite with their families here, and also, of course, to take advantage of the Cuban Adjustment Act, which gives them an opportunity to rebuild their lives here. The real problem is people leave Cuba because there is a dictatorship there that deprives them of all opportunities, including the economic empowerment that they should have a right to.
Do you support the current immigration policy then?
Yes, I do. But I'm eager for it to finish as soon as the dictatorship in Cuba finishes.
Okay, but why do you support it, given that it's something that came up during the Cold War? It's a Cold War policy.
It is a policy that had to do with people running away from dictatorship and finding refuge somewhere where throughout the decades they have already established relatives here. There's a whole Cuban community in the United States. And obviously, if people escape from Cuba, would like to come to a place where they can reunite with their families and where they can have some kind of opportunity to rebuild their lives.
This relationship between Cuba and the U.S. is very complicated because even Republican Senator Marco Rubio, whose parents were Cuban immigrants, said in June this year that the law needs to be re-examined, that all Cuban immigrants are refugees.
Remember that we're in the midst of an electoral process here where, unfortunately, many candidates have taken it against undocumented immigrants and the immigrants in general in the United States. So, unfortunately, Senator Marco Rubio has, because he is also a Republican, has somehow taken the same position as Mr. Donald Trump in regards to the immigrants, because he believes that gives him votes in the United States. But the real issue, the humane and political issue around the Cuban Adjustment Act, has to do not with the electoral process here, but with the reality of dictatorship in the island.
The U.S. has ended the trade embargo with Cuba, and that has been the biggest problem as far as economic prosperity, depending on who you speak to, is concerned for the Cubans. Why should they continue benefiting from the current immigration policy?
Because something that people don't want to realize, they don't want to accept, is the issue of why Cubans leave Cuba. Cubans don't leave Cuba because there is an embargo. Cubans don't leave Cuba because the United States is a friend or it's an enemy. Cubans leave Cuba because they have no opportunity to empower themselves economically, and there is repression. There's rights taken away from them. This is the real reason. So regardless of whether now the two governments are friends, still, the Cuban government maintains an economic and a civil rights embargo against its own people.
And that was my conversation that took place not too long ago with someone who runs an anti-Castro group organization called the Democracy Movement. His name is Ramon Sanchez, and you're speaking to me from Florida.